And mustards is one of those. The entire family, which I believe is around 4,000 species worldwide, are all safe to eat, assuming you don't have an allergy or a sensitivity or something. One of the reasons that I like cow parsnip so much is that it's really great for newer foragers getting into the carrot family. It's just a great one to learn. And then it has a lot of like fun, sort of more intermediate or potentially challenging culinary uses because it's got a lot of strong flavors that are sort of make you think about how to use it versus just like popping it in your mouth when you find it.
Guys, we are gifting this book on the channel right now. So this is Sam Thayer's Field Guide to Wild Edible Plants, a must-have for any forager out there. This is the book I probably get the most value from, and we want to pass the love along to you. So all you have to do is leave a comment on this video right now, and if I reply to your comment with the mushroom emoji, then congratulations. That means you won this gift. Orion, welcome back to the podcast. How's it going, man?
Good. Thanks for having me back, Poldy.
Yeah, no, I'm pumped. I'm glad you wanted to come back on. Last time we had an awesome conversation about some late season mushrooms. Got a lot of good feedback on that, especially from like the audio listeners. And yeah, definitely, some really great tips in that one. So for anyone listening right now, I highly recommend you go back. Orion dropped some like things I've never really thought about too deeply, like scouting for mushrooms with online data and maps and stuff like that. That was very unique. And something I want to just, explore more as well. But today we got you back on to talk more foraging. And, this time we'll get into some plants. One of them, the wild mustards. That's one, I think, I always like to cover plants that are super abundant and can offer a lot of food value. And mustard is one of those that we also like find at the grocery store. So I think it's a good one, especially for like beginner foragers to explore. And I saw that you had some really cool articles on your website, foragecolorado.com, on them. So I figured you might be a good guy to talk to about them. So I'm like curious, wild mustards, they kind of seem to be everywhere, but like, why should we forage for them? And maybe like, why are they so prolific? If you have an answer for that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the mushroom chat was very fun. I love talking mushrooms, but I also love talking plants. And mustards are one of my favorites to talk about, particularly because they're one of the few families, groups, collections of plants that you can generalize pretty safely. Foraging, like people are always trying to find shortcuts, like
Right.
the old wives' tales of like boiling a silver spoon with mushrooms, and if it turns black, they're poisonous or whatever. There's like,
I've
there's
actually
very
never heard
few.
that.
Yeah,
Crazy.
there's some weird ones out there, but there's very few generalizations that you can just be like, if you can match, these traits, you're good to at least eat it. It won't, it's not going to make you sick. And mustards is one of those. The entire family, which I believe is around 4,000 species worldwide.
That's wild.
Are all safe to eat, assuming you don't have an allergy or a sensitivity or something. Some of them might be super bitter or really spicy or just not good tasting, but they're not, as far as I know, toxic, to make you sick or
Yeah.
Potentially be like hospitalizing or deadly or anything like that.
That's my understanding too. The only thing is what you mentioned. I know some people can get like digestive distress from eating too much mustard plants. It's one of those, like, people have issues with the plants in the Brassicaceae family, I think is the right way to say it.
Yeah.
Which that's the mustard family, right?
Yep. The brassicas. They're also sometimes called the cruciferous vegetables, particularly like the cultivated grocery store varieties.
Well, you make a good point there. And I actually wanted to share something about that because a lot of grocery store plants come from the wild mustards, right?
Yeah, huge amount.
I didn't realize that.
Let me pull that up. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it's
broccoli,
Yeah, I found this
cauliflower,
graphic here.
Oh,
kale,
yeah. Yeah, I
cabbage.
mean, when you put it up like that, that makes sense.
So those 6 are all from the same species, and there's, I think, like, another, like, dozen that are from the same species,
Mm,
Brassica oleracea. Um,
That's
yeah,
kind of
but
wild.
there's tons of mustards that we eat, and then also mustard seeds as a condiment,
mhm.
which is just dried ground mustard seeds with vinegar and other flavorings.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, they're just selected for different traits, as you can see in this little graph, and um,
yeah, like the kale is selected for, or yeah, basically
yeah,
coming
big
from the mustard
leaves.
leaves.
Hmm.
The broccoli more the florets, the unopened flower heads on the wild mustard, which we'll show some pictures.
Yeah,
It's
just
sweet.
just selective breeding, through cultivation and picking the
Mhm.
plants that have the desirable traits we want, uh, for decades or hundreds of years. It's
Yeah.
pretty cool stuff.
The mustard is especially one like where you can we can really like relate it back to, the store bought varieties to what it was.
Yeah,
Kind of
and
cool.
that species name, Oleracea, means vegetable also. So
Oh, I
just
didn't know
another
that.
little etymology tidbit that kind of points to their edibility.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm
If it's
like,
called a vegetable, it might be a vegetable.
Yeah. Another one that comes to mind is, purslane. It's Portulaca oleracea, another, like, worldwide eaten plant vegetable.
yeah,
So
quote
they get
unquote
those names for a
weed,
reason.
right?
Yeah, a weed for sure.
Yeah.
So I danced around it, but the generalization that you can do with mustards, pretty much all of these, 4,000-ish species in this family fit the rules, but, not all of them. Some of them break the rules as plants and mushrooms like to do. But, if you can get into a flower and find 4 petals in a cross or a plus shape, um, they're usually pinched, but not always, like, pinched at the base of the petal, and that plus or cross shape is where they get the name cruciferous vegetables, referring to the crucifix, the cross. Um, so there's 4 petals in a plus or cross shape, and then 6 stamens, which are one of the sex parts. 4 are tall and 2 are short. So if you can put together all those features on a plant, it's likely a mustard.
Right.
Um, yeah, if you can confirm that it's a mustard, it's potentially a safe to eat or great to eat, depending on the species. But it's a nice way to sort of quickly be like, that's a mustard.
Right.
The other thing that I notice often with mustards is their unbloomed flowers, are often in little clusters that look like tiny little broccoli heads.
Mm.
Um, so a couple years ago, I actually identified a new, to me, mustard species, called clasping pepperweed, um,
Do you have that in your
Lepidium
pictures?
perfoliata. I don't think I do. I just
Let me
thought of it
see.
now. It's a really unique looking mustard if you look it up. Lepidium perfoliata, I believe is the name. I might be thinking of another Lepidium.
Lepidium. What's the second part?
I think it's perfoliata. Is that the clasping one? Yeah, that's the clasping one. So a very unique looking mustard. It doesn't like it looks kind of like almost like a claytonia with the clasping leaves, or maybe like just some other flowering plant because it has like 2 very different leaf shapes. Very feathery lower leaves and then clasping kind of round stem leaves. But I noticed this little broccoli-like structures at the heads of all these stalks, and I was like, that looks like a mustard. And I kind of quickly looked it up and confirmed, and then tried it, and it was one of the better tasting mustards I've had.
Yeah, that's that's something that has become kind of most apparent to me too, is like just that distinct look that a mustard has. And once you see it, you'll notice it in a lot of plants out there,
Yeah.
probably
Mhm.
because there are so many mustards out there. And actually, going off of what you were saying, I got this little card here from Tom Elpel's, what is it? Shanlia's Quest game. He's got, I don't know if you ever heard about this, but he's got like a card game
No,
where you
that's
can,
cool.
that you can use to like identify plant families. So I don't know, is that focusing? I think
Yeah.
so. So it just kind of goes over what Orion was mentioning with the mustard family, the 4 petals and that cross, the stamens in the middle. 6 stamens, 4 tall, 2 short, like you said.
Yeah.
Yep.
Some of these are like, really big flowers. It's very obvious. Other ones are teeny tiny. You would need like a loop or like some sort of magnifier to see them. But almost all the mustards have that. A few of them do break the rule, but almost all of them have that.
I actually just
And
got a loop this year. I'm like, I need it. I need one out there,
yeah,
you know.
it's super useful. In relation to Tom Milple's card game, which I hadn't heard of, that's pretty cool. His Botany in a Day is really great too. The book, if you
Yeah.
want to learn
Mhm.
more about like botanical features and connect them to foraging, it's a very helpful book that is pretty approachable to the
Totally.
typically overwhelming botanical terms.
Yeah, no, I've been starting to. I have the book. I read it like, kind of skimmed it before, and now I'm
Mhm.
like really sitting down with it and going through it. And I have a whole blog on my website where I just list some of the foraging books, and that
Yeah,
one's
yeah,
in there.
it's a
It's a
great
good
book.
one.
Yeah, I always
Totally.
recommend that book. So to touch on another thing you mentioned, mustards. I mentioned 4,000 species around the world. They're really common. Oftentimes, they're weedy, kind of growing in disturbed areas or around human settlements. Things like that. Gardens, yards, construction sites, sidewalks, driveways. Various places that weeds typically grow. And the main two reasons that I think they're so successful in widespreading is um, they're mostly annuals, so they live their life by going to flower, making seeds, and dying every year. Typically, annuals make a lot of seeds, and so those large number of seeds can make a lot more plants quickly. And if they're not managed by spraying or mowing or something, seeds can like exponentially grow in the soil. And
Right.
then they also tend to seed pretty quickly. Some species will flower, seed, and die by like the end of March or April here in Colorado. Musk mustard, which is one that I'm sure we'll talk about a little more. It's one of my favorites to eat. Usually by the end of March, I can find plants that are already making seeds.
Oh wow, that's early.
Yeah. So they're like, let's get this done quickly. Um, so I think, yeah, that helps. And then some other species have, like explosive seed dispersal. Their pods will dry up and pop a little bit, so the seeds can go wider. And then another factor is because they're food or medicine potentially, they have been spread, in cases of colonization or settlement. People bring them as food or medicine, put them in, their gardens or their plots for those specific reasons, and then over time they naturalize and spread. Um, so those
I'm
kind of
sure.
all contribute to the widespread and vicarious nature of them.
I'm sure animals probably like him too.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
maybe they're spreading them around.
I think some animals do eat them, but um, they do have those kind of strong chemically flavors sometimes that maybe could prevent some animals from wanting to pick at them. I know we
Mm.
have um, tumble mustard and musk mustard around our chicken coop, and the chickens tend to really like the tumble mustard, but they don't eat as much of the musk mustard. I've noticed.
Interesting.
Interesting.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, and then I think I read that almost all mustards are invasive in the US, in North
Mm.
America. Pretty sure they're all coming from like Eurasia.
we have a lot of invasive ones, but we have quite a few native ones too.
Okay.
Like as far as I know, we got a lot of like rock cresses or stone cresses, little tiny mustards that you wouldn't probably forage for. We have one that comes to mind for me that I'm kind of wanted to do a little more with this year is heartleaf bittercress.
Ooh, that sounds
Um,
cool.
yeah, I didn't send a picture of that one either, but it just came to mind. It's one that grows high elevation into alpine. So native to Colorado, and it has, as the name would suggest, kind of heart-shaped leaves and big white mustard flowers. It really likes like alpine streams and stuff. And the first couple times I tried it, it was really bitter and kind of unpalatable. But last year, I just on a whim, like picked some and ate it raw, just right on the trail, and it was actually very pleasant. So I'm curious if there's some variance there, or maybe you just tried like the first patch I tried was not super tasty. But yeah, there's some native species for sure. I think there's quite a few wallflowers that are also native. Those are in the mustard family as well.
So that actually kind of raises an interesting question. What you just said, the the variance in flavor, because that was one of my questions. Like if you've kind of found a difference in flavor depending on the environment or time of the year. I mean, that's common for a lot of wild plants, right? So I
Hmm.
assume mustards is similar.
Yeah, I've certainly experienced, same time of year, different plants, flavor variants, just like ones that are maybe growing in full sun or stronger flavored versus ones that are growing in shade. That's often how plants are. The ones growing in shade have to put more energy into leaf growth. And so their leaves are more mild and tender. Um, and then seasonal variants, mustards, as they switch from leaf production to flower and seed production, they get more spicy, more bitter. And so there's definitely a big variance in when you're harvesting them.
Okay.
And then from species to species, of course, lots of variance.
Yeah.
What parts of the mushroom are you typically harvesting? Or not mushroom, sorry, mustard.
Um, yeah, for sure. I tend to get the most leaves. Spring is like leafy greens for foragers. We're coming out of a winter of eating not many wild fresh plants, and so spring is like get as many as possible. At least for me. And so yeah, the mustards I'm typically trying to get leaves first. Depending on the species, there are some other parts that I like to use. The seed pods can be pretty interesting if they have larger pods. If you get them green, you can pickle them, and they kind of make like you've maybe run into or seen like pickled radish pods, which are quite large. You can sort of make like mini versions of those. Radishes also being mustard.
Mm.
Um,
Let me see if I can pull up a picture of a mustard seed pod.
yeah, and there are tons of different. I sent a picture of some that were dried out. The field pennycress, but there's tons of different shapes and sizes. There's little circles, there's heart-shaped ones, there's big, long, slender pods, there's kind of thicker pods, lots of variants there.
So are you
Yeah.
typically only harvesting in the springtime for mustard, or are you kinda harvesting year long?
Depends on the parts that you're after. Generally, in Colorado at least, and I think, other Western states would probably match this, early spring to mid-spring would be greens, and then mid-spring to, late spring probably would be, um, flower buds, flowers, and green seed pods, and then late spring to mid to late summer, depending on species and elevation, would be seeds. If you're wanting to make mustard condiment or use the seeds as a spice, which I
Mm.
do as well.
So it doesn't go that much into summer really. It's more of a spring thing.
At least in my region, again, elevation makes a big difference. If I'm harvesting heartleaf, bittercress, I could be up in the mountains in August or September, and because they're at 11, 12, 13,000 feet, they're going to be just making flowers or
Right.
just going to seed. But big variance there, and species variance too. Like I mentioned, musk mustard, I've seen going to seed at the end of March. You can also sometimes find them going in 2 cycles, so they'll seed and then some new ones will sprout if they get, some water and nutrients, and then they'll also go to seed, so they might, like, have 2 cycles of seeding in 1 year. And some mustards will also do a fall, some annuals, and some perennial mustards too will send up new greens in the fall. You can harvest those as
Mm.
well, so it's
Interesting.
variable by species.
Have you
That's good
noticed
to know.
any big different flavors? So if you harvest something in the spring and then again in the fall, is there quite a difference?
The greens, spring versus fall, tend to be pretty similar in my experience. I don't do a ton of mustard picking in the later season. My
Mm.
foraging for it is generally like spring. maybe early summer.
Gotcha.
So in the spring, you're looking for often just leaves, even without a necessarily like a stem. I have a picture here. This one has a stem already. This is one of your
Yep.
pictures.
Yep. And those leaves will still be edible. That's in the foreground is shepherd's purse, and then in the background is musk mustard. In the
Mhm.
background, back left, the back right is another shepherd's purse, I believe. They're
Over
pretty
there.
similar. But yeah, those leaves on the shepherd's purse in the front would still be edible. They might be a little tougher and stronger flavored than one that's not flowering. Um, Same with the musk mustard in the back. At this stage, I would typically just harvest like the tops of plants wherever they're tender, where I can break them easily with my fingers. I would just go through
Right.
and like snap off stems and then chop those up or saute them whole.
Yeah,
Do
let
you
me
have
see, because
any
I think
Oh, go ahead.
photos. What are you gonna say?
Oh, I was gonna ask if you have any favorite recipes or preparations for the wild mustard?
Yeah, my favorite typically is just to um, chop the greens up and saute them or mix them with other greens or
Hmm.
into a dish that would require cooked greens. I think
Mm.
it's a really good way to eat a lot of them. If you're trying to, if you have a bunch of them, it's kind of a nice way to eat a lot of them instead of trying to eat them raw. It also mellows out the flavors or brings out new flavors. But I've also done a lot of like pickling. I've done some fermenting with mustard leaves.
Ooh.
Really? So how do you go about that? I've never fermented leaves. I know I've read articles on it,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'd love to
So
hear.
sauerkraut is a cabbage or is cabbage, which is a mustard.
Right. No,
And
yeah,
so
that's
fermenting
true.
that, same with kimchi, napa cabbage, another mustard.
Okay,
So
so I
those are
have done
just
those,
yeah,
and I guess a wild one would be very similar. Yeah, I never
yeah. So
put that together.
the things to keep in mind with mustards with wild mustards would be the greens are going to be more fragile. So if you do a long ferment or you like massage them vigorously, like you might with sauerkraut or kimchi, they might dissolve, and then you're left with like a fermented mustard paste, like a
Mm,
green paste, which is tasty and it's kind of fun to
yeah.
use culinarily. If you're trying to kind of preserve some of that structure, you might harvest more fibrous leaves like later in the season when they've started to make flowers or seed pods. Um, but yeah, they generally just get like more funky and more spicy. Um, Mixing into other ferments is nice too. So if you're making a sauerkraut, you can pick some wild mustard and mix it in, and then if they
Mm,
dissolve, it's just more flavor, and you don't need
that
to
would
worry
be
about
really good.
having
That's a
just
great
like a
idea.
Yeah,
fermented
we're gonna have
green
to try that.
paste.
Fermented green
Sounds really
paste.
Yeah.
sounds great, honestly.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, it's really unique and flavorful. Yeah, and you just had the picture up there, but like horseradish, another
oh
mustard,
yeah, let me get
if
that up.
people weren't aware, that one can sometimes go feral, and that brings up the mustard roots, which is another thing you can use. So horseradish is cultivated for its large, spicy root.
Mhm.
These are feral horseradish that I found around the city here in northern Colorado. And the greens are also edible on those, and those, might be a little bit of a tougher, spicier leaf. So those might be good to ferment. But
So,
that brings
were
up
you,
the roots as well.
we'll get to roots in a sec here. Were you for these? Were you just like seeking them out, or did you just stumble on these? Because that's pretty
No,
cool.
I was out on a walk. They're in like there's like a neighborhood that backed up to an irrigation ditch, and like you could see a chain link fence in the back. So above that chain link fence it looked like a backyard with a garden in it, and they had just escaped at some point from that garden and were growing on the edge of the irrigation ditch. I also found
Yeah.
feral garlic like just down the ditch from these.
So for people listening, if you're walking past people with gardens, keep an eye out for what's escaping that.
Might be some
Yeah,
free
feral
grabs.
rhubarb is another one. Yeah.
And actually, I want to talk about the roots in just a sec here, but you mentioned the unopened flower heads, and I found a picture of one mustard that we like to go for, the Dame's Rocket.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
here's, I think, a good example of that. That kind of, looks like the like
Broccoli.
a little like a broccoli floret, the little ones,
Yeah,
Mhm.
Dame's rocket is one of the more common invasive species. They get really pretty purple flowers. We have quite a bit of that here in Colorado too, but
Mhm.
I always forget about it until I see big splotches of purple like growing up the river canyon walls, and I'm like, oh dang, I forgot Dame's rocket again.
Here we go. Yeah. No, I mean, this is one of my favorite wild edibles for sure.
Mhm.
Same.
It's just like you meant to set the purple. I mean, look at that. For people listening, we're showing a picture right now, and it's just this beautiful lavender color.
Mhm.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
pretty flowers, which is why they're so invasive. They make a lot of seeds. People like them because they're pretty. I mean, I see them in people's yards all the time, easily
You can kind
spread.
of
Yeah.
see the seed pods here already.
Yep, little small seed pods.
Yeah.
We made them for the first time last year, and the way we did it, it was just fried in oil with some salt and pepper, but it
Yeah.
tasted like we were eating popcorn,
Yeah.
Oh
which we
wow.
don't ever eat popcorn, so it was, like, the best treat ever, and I still think about it. So,
Well,
very
you've got
excited
something
for
to look
this year.
forward to this spring. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah.
I do the same with tumble mustard, which is a really common
Mm.
one here in Colorado.
Let me
It's a
pull that up.
tumbleweed, so goes into big, bushy kind of clusters, and then at the end of the year breaks off and rolls and drops all of its seeds. Pretty problematic for agricultural areas, but the seed tops or the flower tops, which you can see in that picture there, are very similar to rapini or broccoli rabe, which is like a very known bitter broccoli variant that you can get in grocery stores. It's typically blanched and then sautéed or cooked
Mm.
otherwise.
And
And
this
these
one,
are sort of like slightly more wild, a little bit more like spicier bitter broccoli rabe, but otherwise
Mm.
pretty similar.
looks definitely kind of like arugula to me,
Yeah, the
Another,
leaves can be arugula-like. That's another mustard.
right.
Um,
And we're looking at Orion's website here, Forage, Colorado. You got some great articles on there, including the
yeah,
mustards.
thanks. Yeah,
I
there's
mean,
some
I
tumble
see this
mustard
all the
leaves.
time. Lindy, we just walked past this earlier on our
I
lunch
know.
walk.
Yeah, you probably have it. It's a common one in the western states for sure.
Where we see it,
Yeah,
it's always, like, right next to someone's backyard where they spray their grass and all
For
that stuff,
sure.
so
Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna have to pay attention to that one this year for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And
it's certainly more on the strong, spicy, bitter side. So, a boil, a blanch is necessary for sure.
so, yeah, I mean, that was one of my questions. Like, how do you kind of balance that mustardy flavor in the kitchen? You mentioned boiling, like blanching that already. I know remove some bitterness.
Mhm.
Um, what else do you like to do there?
So if it's a species is going to be bitter or spicy flavored, harvesting it earlier in the season before it starts making, buds or flowers will reduce that. Finding ones that are growing in shaded areas. Otherwise, if you're looking to harvest apart like the flower stalks that are, going to have those strong flavors, blanching is a great option. That works really well with winter cress, which is another very common species around the US. Its greens are very flavorful, but they're quite bitter. And so they almost require like a boiling first. So the ones that are very, very bitter, you can boil for longer than a, blanch would be.
Mm.
Um, Aside from that, fermenting can sometimes alter the flavor. Sometimes it will enhance it. Sometimes it can, mellow it out, just depending on the species. I've had sort of mixed results from that. Um, the next thing would be, how you're cooking it. If you cut it, with like an acid or some sort of sugar, that might balance some of those flavors. But oftentimes, those spicy bitter flavors are compounds, within the green that are sort of made to tell us like, hey, don't eat too much of that. Um, so if you're eating it and it's like starting to like get to you a little bit, it's probably you've had enough.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So, I mean, I'm definitely a staunch meat eater. And I
Mm,
think a lot of despite my love for foraging and everything. And I think a lot of people, that is they just have a lot of gut issues these days, and a lot of that I think is plant related, and because of those compounds that you just alluded to, things that the plant has inherently in the plant to kind of keep it from getting eaten or overeaten by herbivores. And I mean, that's why you often see animals nibbling on a plant here and then moving to the next one. And it's like,
Mhm.
unless it's like an agricultural plant, I think it's rare for a wild animal to really just mow down a whole patch of a single species. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
and I forget all the compounds that are in mustards. There's like organosulfides and phenols and various other things that I don't remember all the. I've looked them up in the past and they just don't stick with me. But those all those various compounds that give them those flavors. They're either produced to prevent browse or to prevent insect predation for the most part. Some of them use them for, like garlic mustard, uses some of those compounds to reduce plant and mushroom competition. So they'll put that into the soil and kill native plants or suppress
Mm.
native plants and mushrooms for a number of years.
Yeah, that's
So
crazy.
yeah, those flavors are coming from compounds within the plants. And, some of them are just hard or impossible to remove with cooking methods, and our bodies will certainly let us know when we shouldn't be eating too much of them.
Yeah, and garlic mustard is especially one of those that is very successful with that strategy. I think it's like a lip a allipathy or something like that is the word for it. Allopathy,
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah, that would make sense. I forget what the term is too.
Yeah, but they're
The,
nasty. They can get nasty.
yeah, the genus is Olearia. I always screw that one up.
But it's a great mustard for people to get into, to
Yeah,
start out with, because
Olearia.
it's like, especially when I was in Wisconsin, we used to have like days where me and my friends would go and just pull as much garlic mustard as we could just
Mhm.
to get rid of it because it's very invasive.
Yeah, we have it in Colorado. It's not as widespread as it is in the Midwest and Eastern states, but it's around, typically on our low elevation rivers. I shared a picture of one, and yeah, anytime I see it, I'll pull it up and harvest what I can to use it, just to keep it from spreading too much. But yeah, they're very successful at suppressing native plants for a number of years. I remember reading something about some sort of connection with garlic mustard and whitetail. Like, do you recall that? I don't remember
No,
exactly what it was.
I haven't seen that.
I feel like
Yeah,
there was some sort of association with
white-tailed deer, you
white-tailed
mean?
deer not eating it but spreading the seeds, and so
Ah,
Hmm.
okay.
it would it would spread through them, but they wouldn't browse it, so it wouldn't be controlled by them, something like
I
that.
could see
Interesting.
that. Like,
And so, the larger the deer populations you have, which can be a problem in some eastern states, the more garlic mustard can spread right away. The
yeah, it's like almost
takes
the
it over.
plants are controlling us and the animals,
Yeah.
Like, there's a whole theory on like, are we farming the corn or is the corn farming us?
Both.
Right. Yeah.
Just plants are smart. So actually, while we're on this, we mentioned some of the potential toxins in garlic mustard or in mustards. There's also some health compounds, and Rhonda Patrick found my fitness. She always loves to talk about sulforaphane, and it's like a really powerful antioxidant that is
Yeah,
found in
yeah.
the broccoli type, mustard type plants. And she had a pretty cool post here. I'll just read some of it at least, where she said that add mustard seed powder to your cooked broccoli. A small trial finds that when people eat cooked broccoli with 1 gram of powdered mustard seeds, the bioavailability of sulforaphane increases more than fourfold compared to eating cooked broccoli alone. Other studies have shown similar data, but this is the first one that I'm aware of that showed it in vivo, so in
Hmm.
people. So yeah, that's pretty cool. And the sulforaphane is
Yeah.
definitely one cool benefit from eating mustards.
Yeah, I've heard some, and I don't know if these have been studied deeply or I've heard talk of, mustards having anti-cancer properties and some of those various other health benefits.
I think
Again, I don't know that
sulforaphane
much
is one
about.
of those. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that much about the studies related to that, but
Yeah.
I've heard that.
Well, if someone listening right now is a nerd about this, definitely drop in the comments and share your info so everyone can read that
Yeah,
and learn.
I'm almost purely a foodie when it comes to foraging and wild foods. So I like learning the medicinal and health benefits, and I know that they exist, but I don't generally like seek them out and try to learn all of the medicinal benefits. I just like eating them. And my brain can only hold so much information.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
That's a
that's
good,
where I'm
honest
at too at
answer.
this point. Like, I love nutrition.
Yeah,
It is.
I love every time I take like a class that's sort of like herbal adjacent. I've taken a couple of classes with Linda Blackout where she does food as medicine. So she's like talks about commonly foraged plants, but then talks about the medicine side of it too. Um, Super interesting. But again, like just the food is what always drew me into it and draws me into it, and it's the stuff that I sort of focus on.
Mm.
Well, and she's up here, I think, in Montana. I think she's from the Crow um tribe, right? I'm pretty sure. It's my buddy.
Linda
Yeah.
previously lived in North Dakota and has since moved to Minnesota. I know her husband is Lakota. Um, I don't
Okay, because
remember. Yeah.
I thought she was from around Montana. Because my buddy Jacob, pretty big forager out here, that really like knows her well, and so I don't know. But yeah, she's awesome. She's got some really good info and definitely some classes I'd love to take in the future too. So
Yeah. Every time I get to hang out with Linda and her husband Luke, they're so fun. They know so much and they always have great stories.
that's cool. I'm gonna have to meet up with them too at some point. Are they at the? Does she ever come to the Wild Food Fest in Wisconsin?
Yeah,
The Wild Food Gathering.
she usually does. She wasn't last year, but she was the year before. And I just looked up an article. She's Korean, Mongolian, and Catawba. She grew up in Ohio.
Okay,
Mm.
I'm totally wrong then.
So everyone was super
Yeah.
far off.
Yeah, her husband is Lakota though,
Okay.
Mm.
and
Yeah.
her children.
Well, I hope to see you. Hopefully I can get a ticket for this Wisconsin Wild Food Fest here in 2025.
Yeah,
I've been
I haven't
keeping an eye.
even I haven't even decided if I'm gonna try to go or not. I need to look at my schedule. I probably
Yeah,
will, but it's a big haul from Colorado. So.
it is.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. But it'd be nice to like link up in person with more people and just there's everyone I've talked to that's been there said there's a lot of value in those
Mhm.
3 days. So
Yeah, there's a
yeah,
lot of great classes, and the community connections are wonderful for sure.
awesome. So going back to mustards, you mentioned the musk mustard now. We looked at the tumble mustard, which, is for people here where we live in more in the Rocky region, definitely want to check out. We talked about like the garlic mustard and Dame's Rocket that people can probably find all throughout the US.
Mhm.
What about the musk mustard here? Let me share it quick, share your article.
Yeah, musk mustard tends to be another Western species as far as I understand, but it's, um, you know, can be found elsewhere, but it's most common in the West where it's actually invasive. In some areas, it's considered noxious, especially in areas with a lot of cattle production because it um, makes their milk taste bad when they
Interesting.
eat it.
Mm.
So you probably have a lot of cattle ranchers out there that are like, yes, please come pick this.
Yeah.
Get as much as you can off my field.
Don't even need to get it there. It just like grows around my house readily, which is pretty nice. So yeah, it's smaller mustard. It has these kind of pretty small blue purple flowers. They're pinched, as I mentioned. Um, it's got kind of small hairs on its leaves and stems, which you can see in the photo that we're showing now if you're a video viewer. And then it has these small spiked seed pods. Its leaves are a little bit variable. They kind of can look like dandelion leaves with rounded lobes. And then they can also be like just sort of lightly scalloped. And yeah, generally not a very tall mustard, maybe 6 to 12 inches, at least in Colorado. In places that get a little more rain, it might be a little taller. Um,
And
and
looks
the
like on a
name,
sandy soil.
yeah, that's
Mhm.
that was in town here, but grown under some ponderous pines, kind of a sandy clay mix. But they at our house they grow in pretty heavy clay. They're not too picky. They tend to grow wherever they can. Um, the name musk mustard is accurate because they have this like very strong musky smell. Um,
Mm.
in Western states and particularly in Colorado, which I have the most experience in. In the spring, you can be driving with your windows down, and you'll just get like a hit of this, just like musky. Like a lot of people are allergic to it or find it like very unpleasant.
Huh.
And it's this plant in like big fields, and you can look out and just see like a big patch of purple, along the side of the road. Um, but that smell gives it a really unique flavor, especially when cooked. It kind of mellows out and becomes this like almost mushroom, like very
Mm,
earthy flavor.
that's
Hmm.
cool. I've definitely seen
It's
this.
really good.
Definitely seen this plant. Lindy, we've seen that in our walks before.
Yeah.
Yep.
And in this stage and then any previous stage, just budding or before budding, I'll just harvest any tender part. Um, and I like to just chop them up and saute them usually.
Awesome. I'll have to keep my eye out for those.
Yeah, they're good.
Sweet. So mustards. One more thing we wanted to talk about. Lindy, you wanna get
Yeah, I
into
was gonna
the
ask if
mustard
you've
condiment?
have you tried to turn mustard into the traditional mustard condiment or had any success there?
I have. Yeah, I've done it a couple times. I have, yeah. It depends on the species you use. Some of them have a lot larger seeds that are easier to collect. Most of the like store-bought commercial mustard is coming from black mustard or some cultivar of black mustard, which has very large seeds. The mustard seeds you would get in the grocery store in the spice section are also generally black mustard.
Mm.
Unfortunately for me, that one is not super common in Colorado, so I have to sort of focus on some other species. And the one I've used the most is field pennycress, and it has these like large kind of coin or rounded flat discs as seed pods.
Think you have that
Usually,
in
yeah,
a
there are some
picture of it.
pictures, a picture of that
Let
one.
me pull that
Usually,
up.
like June, July. And those you can just sort of like
Mm.
strip off the top and just like they're easy to get a lot of seeds out of. Fairly large compared to some of the other species we have, and often in like big fields where they all go to seed at once.
Mm.
So that's the one I've used the most. And then, regardless of the species, if you can collect the seeds, it's the same process. The only difference would be the flavor, maybe. Um, and from there, you can kind of do whatever you want with them. So typically, they're dried. Whether that's a dehydrator or if you're in a dry climate, just leaving them out to dry out, lose some of that moisture content. Um, Once dried, you can do like a ferment, which would be like like a whole grain mustard. You can just ferment them in a saltwater brine. You can do like a vinegar mustard, and then from there you can add any flavors you want. Honey mustard, different vinegars to change the flavor. You can use wild vinegars. So the world's your oyster when it comes to changing the
Mm.
flavor of your mustard condiment. And using wild mustards also offers a lot of potential interesting flavors. The ones that I've made just follow like a very basic like dried mustard seeds ground into a powder mixed with vinegar and some sort of sweetener just to balance the flavor until I liked it.
Mm.
You can also just leave the seeds whole to get like a coarse mustard, right?
Totally, yeah, like a whole grain or a stone ground, you could like partially grain some of or partially ground some of them and then either ferment them or do the vinegar style
Mhm.
mustard condiment. Yeah, I wish that we had some larger seeded varieties here. I probably need to do some more experimenting, but this field pennycress is so common, and It's good enough. It's not the most like pleasant tasting mustard in terms of the greens. I don't generally eat the greens because they're pretty strong flavored. Although now that I say that, I recall my friend Erica, Wild Food Girl, fermenting this species, field pennycress, and having some success at mellowing those flavors. So there's an example of that from our
That's
discussion
cool.
earlier.
Yeah, I feel like
Yeah,
I was gonna say I want to try Dame's Rocket, but looking back at the pictures now, the seed pods are really thin, and I think they're gonna have
really
tiny,
small
tiny
seeds.
seeds. Yeah.
Yeah. I think black mustard is a potted mustard with just larger pods. But these ones that are more in like the discs, um, they might have better, seed size or at least collectability. But
Mhm.
any of them that work, even the teeny tiny ones, you just gotta go through the process of collecting them.
Yeah,
So
right. And if you're gonna grind it,
are you going through and opening all of those seed pods, or do you have a quick way to harvest some of those?
Yeah. So the best way to do it is to check a couple plants when you're, noticing them starting to turn yellow. And if the pods are easily breaking open when you're like handling them, then you can just go through with like a bag, like a cloth bag or a paper bag, and just either cut the top of the plant or put the whole top of the plant in there and just like strip all of the
Mm.
seeds off. Gloves probably recommended, just because there's some little pokey bits in there. You can just strip all of those off into a bag at the same time, and then just like crush them up with your hand, and that'll like loosen all the seeds up, and then you can just like winnow them off with like a traditional like basket, or rolling them down a tray, or a little bit of a breeze. I've even
like a
done it just
fan
with
would
like,
work.
yeah, I've even done it just in my hand, like just like a little short puffs of air from my mouth to like blow off that loose stuff.
Gotcha.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you have a little bit in there, probably doesn't matter too much.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not going to affect it.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that you can do with mustards as a condiment, or other, is the roots. We kind of touched on this briefly
Oh
earlier.
yeah, the roots.
Horseradish, common mustard condiment, although a lot of people don't know that horseradish is a mustard. But that spiciness is coming from, those compounds that give the mustards their spicy flavors. Um, there are other species. I haven't done a ton of experimenting with wild mustard roots, but there are species that will have, spicy or strongly flavored roots that you can use. They're going to be a lot smaller than a horseradish would be. Um, but they can also be ground into a paste like horseradish is, and turned into that same sort of condiment. And then Pascal Vaudar does a lot of like wild mustard root ferments, which is pretty interesting. And he's usually using that root just to like flavor the brine or the
Mm.
paste, the fermented paste. So you can like, I think he typically will like pound them up to break up the surface area a little bit, and then add
Mm.
them into ferment. So there's some cool stuff that he does.
Yeah, we just did on Sunday we did a webinar that he was doing with making sodas.
Oh, nice.
It
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
very
I've done a
entertaining.
few of his webinars. He's great. And I've been lucky enough to forage with him a couple times when he was in Colorado.
Ah, sweet. He
Yeah, he's
seems
a
like a
really
really
cool
nice
guy.
guy.
Yeah.
That's cool though. That's a fun project with the roots, especially like for people listening who are maybe doing one of those garlic mustard pulling days, in their community. Yeah, there you go. You probably got a ton of roots after that,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Garlic
especially.
mustard roots are actually also really unique because the core of them is like this vibrant purple color.
Yeah,
So when you break them off, might be some, I don't know, maybe there's some like dye uses for that or something.
That'd be
yeah,
fun.
that would
That'd
be
be
fun.
really
I
fun.
don't know anything about that, but when I think of things that are bright purple in nature, typically they're used as dyes.
That's interesting. I didn't even think about the roots too much, but yeah, horseradish. There you go, people.
Yeah.
Good tips. All right. Is there anything mustardy or mustard related that we forgot to mention that we should have maybe touched on? I think we covered it pretty good.
Yeah, I think so. Um, I can't think of anything else. I do often run into like feral versions of cultivated species, especially if they're near like a cover crop planted field. A lot of cover crops use mustard varieties like radishes and stuff. And I'll see like feral radishes and feral horseradish, and some of those other mustards too. So it's worth just keeping your eye out for things that look mustardy.
Yeah, you could probably spend your whole foraging career just learning all the different mustard varieties and
For sure.
if that's what you're into. Sweet. All right. Well, if you still got a little time, I'd love to get into the cow parsnip.
Yeah, for sure.
No, totally different plant family, but also a really prolific plant that grows in most states from what I learned about it. And it is a parsley family plant, so parsnips. Well, what is, like, maybe you can just touch on, like, what is the cow parsnip? I don't know if you know why it's called cow parsnip. I actually never looked into that. And why you like foraging for it.
Yeah, so cow parsnip, as you mentioned, in the carrot, parsley, celery family. Definitely not a family you can generalize like the mustards.
No.
This one contains some of the most deadly plants, poison hemlock and water hemlock, and a handful of others. But poison hemlock and water hemlock are the most common ones in North America. We have a ton of poison hemlock in Colorado and of water hemlock.
And those are definitely ones that people need to, like, listening. If you haven't familiarized yourself with them, please do.
Yep.
Because, they're very, very poisonous.
Yeah, don't eat the wild carrots until you know those ones.
There's the parsley family.
Yeah.
Might actually be a cow parsnip illustration on there.
So one of the reasons that I like cow parsnip so much is that it's really great for newer foragers getting into the carrot family. It looks nothing like the toxic species that we mentioned. It's got big palmately lobed leaves. There's like 3 or 5 leaflets, versus the hemlocks have multi-compound pinnately lobed leaves, very feathery. They just look totally different. So it's
do you have that on you have it on your website, right?
I do, yeah. It's just a great one to learn, and then it has a lot of like fun, sort of slightly more intermediate or potentially challenging culinary uses, because it's got a lot of strong flavors that are sort of make you think about how to use it versus just like popping it in your mouth when you find it. And I think that that's a really good way, to sort of take a step into, the next level as a forager. So yeah, that article has a bunch of different, pictures of it, but leaves in particular.
There we go.
So those leaves on the upper center and upper right or upper left, are the cow parsnip. The lower right is angelica, which is another common edible, pretty unique carrot family member, but that one can look a little closer to water hemlock, so it takes a little more practice.
All right.
But yeah, cow parsnip, big palmately lobed leaves, so palm shaped versus like a pinnate leaf, which is leaflets in sort of like a feathery paralleled structure. And that's a good picture. You can very clearly see the palmately lobed leaves.
I've heard it described as more like maple-like, the leaves.
Yeah, maple-like.
I could see that.
For sure. Yeah, a maple leaf would be a palmately lobed leaf. So cow parsnip, their leaves are made of usually 3 palmately lobed leaflets, which are just, smaller leaves comprising one entire leaf. So you can see if you're looking at the pictures, you can see it very, very clearly here. They're also really super hairy on their stems and underside of their leaves. So that's another thing that separates them from the toxic species. Things to pay attention for in these families. Another really common plant in this one would be Queen Anne's lace or wild carrot. Same species as cultivated carrots. That one can look very similar to poison hemlock, but it can be separated by the hairs on its stems. So knowing those small traits to look for, it becomes a little more nuanced to identify these. But yeah, cow parsnip. I don't know how it got its name. Yeah, parsnips
probably
are, of
like
course,
it.
yeah, in the carrot family, cows probably like it, or it grows in a in a place where cows like to hang out when it was named. Who knows? There's also cow parsley in this family.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I forget which that one is. Anthriscus sylvestris. So that's cow parsley. Or wild chervil. That's another name for that one. So for some reason they get called cow, whatever.
I'm gonna have to look into that after this episode.
Yeah,
The
it's more commonly called wild chervil, I think.
the cow parsnip can get like really tall, right? So they're gonna send up a big flower stalk.
Yeah, like 6 to 8 feet tall is very common in my area.
It's like a monster of an edible plant. Yeah.
Yeah, their flower stalks can be, like inch or 2 inches wide. Big, tall plants. So, another reason that I like them a lot is they are prolific in Colorado. So they grow from our lowest elevations along our rivers in the eastern part of the state all the way up into the highest elevations in Alpine. So it's a species that if you know how to identify it and you know how to eat it, it can be used, it can be found essentially, growing season throughout the entire growing season. So early spring all the way to fall. Winter obviously doesn't grow, but you can harvest the seeds in winter even. So it's almost like a year-round plant.
That's great. Those are my favorite.
Yeah,
have a
it
lot of
isn't
food.
that available in states that don't have the elevation, like we have in the West. But that's another reason I like it here in Colorado.
But it is native. Like I have this map here from Banff, and it seems to be one that is like throughout most of the U.S. The only places that aren't highlighted here are Texas and like some states around it, Florida. But it still might grow there. It's just maybe not native there. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was in most of those southern states. Maybe not Florida. Florida tends to be one of the states that like is excluded from a lot of the plants that are, U.S. or North America wide. It's also found in all the Canadian provinces.
And Alaska too, I read.
Yep, and Alaska too. So it's the only species of its genus found in North America. There are other ones such as giant hogweed, and
Is that edible?
it's edible, but potentially more problematic because of the really strong phototoxicity.
Yeah, that's
which cow
important to get in.
parsnip has as well, and we'll talk about as well. But yeah, I had my slight bit of dyslexia always screws up the genus for me. I have to look at it. Hercleum, I think it is.
Man, I don't think you have dyslexia. You're so good at remembering all these names.
Heracleum. I remember them, but like the some of the letters flip sometimes, so it's like, I screw them up in my brain, and I have to think about it for a while. Yeah, Heracleum. So it's the only species of Heracleum native to North America, which is pretty cool. So in the eastern states, we do have giant hogweed, and so cow parsnip kind of becomes misidentified and targeted as giant hogweed, which involves like spraying and mowing and like problematic weed management, sometimes pretty intensely. But giant hogweed is like a much taller plant, like 10, 12, 15 feet tall. Just a much taller plant.
I don't think I ever ran into that one yet. Maybe I need to pay more attention, but
it's mostly eastern states, and it's not that common as far as I understand.
Well, another edible parsnip that kind of looks like it is the yellow parsnip, the feral yellow parsnip, right?
Yeah.
So that's the one I have foraged for. I've never actually gone out and gotten the cow parsnip, but it's been a minute. It's been like 6 years or so. But when I lived in Wisconsin, me and my buddies, there was one year where we kind of went pretty hard after the yellow parsnips.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
I'm just looking up parsnips to see. Okay, so they're a different genus. They're in Pastinaca. So no idea why cow parsnip gets that name, even though the actual parsnip is a different genus.
Right.
But yeah, they do look kind of similar. So maybe that's why the leaves are parsnip-like.
Yeah, you do have obviously yellow flowers in that one,
Mhm.
and it's a bit more. They're not quite as loped. They're more like the feathery, pinnately looking leaves, but larger,
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
large still. Yeah,
So the phototoxicity I mentioned being a
right.
problem for giant hogweed. That's what it's like known for, causing like severe chemical burns for people. That's kind of why it's like has that air of like we need to control this thing very, intensely whenever we find it, because it has hospitalized people before with
So what is that? The
severe chemical burning.
phototoxicity?
So toxicity is just the juice being reactive to UV light. So if you get the juice on your skin and expose it to UV light, sunlight, it can create chemical burns. In severe cases, blistering, reddening, itchiness, swelling. Um, yeah, I have it in the article, and forget it. I think it's phytophotodermatitis or phytophotodermatitis or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. I remember too, because
Which
I
is
was
just like plant light, skin, a skin issue, skin irritation.
yeah,
So
because when I was first foraging for the yellow parsnip, that was a big concern of mine.
Hmm.
So, and my buddy actually, he had like this eczema stuff where no one could tell him what it is, and I'm pretty sure because we were always trout fishing along streams, and we would find a lot of the parsnips there.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
pretty sure that's what he had. Yeah,
hmm.
Lindy, what were you gonna say?
So is
Sorry.
it best just to harvest wearing gloves and long sleeves and pants? And
Yeah. So cow parsnip is also one of these phototoxic plants. I think it's like a little bit overblown because, as you mentioned, parsnips also have it.
Even the garden parsnips does.
Yeah, garden parsnips, parsley, like the stuff you buy in the store, flat leaf parsley can have it. A lot of the carrot family can have it.
Wait, so
Limes are also.
I shouldn't take parsley baths anymore? Thank God.
Parsley
Never done
baths. That
that.
sounds like some sort of health craze. The new ice bath.
Let's start it now. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The phototoxicity is healthy. Don't do that.
Don't do that. No.
um, Limes can also be phototoxic, and figs and other kind of closely related plants, and some others even. So, it's not that uncommon to see. Um, Preventing it would just be, trying not to get the juice on your skin. And if you do, trying to, prevent that from being exposed to intense sunlight. It can be especially problematic in the high elevations. If you're harvesting cow parsnip up in Alpine, say, the sun is so intense up there and there's no shade. So if you get it on your skin, I've heard of early season archery hunters like sitting in like a patch of cow parsnip glassing or looking for elk or deer and just like accidentally getting it on their
Oh
skin
yeah.
and having like severe reactions and having to like end their hunt and come out of the mountains.
That's actually very real. Like I have
Yeah.
avoided parsnip looking plants because of that while I was hunting. I'm like, I'm not
Mhm.
getting in there right now. Yeah.
So, yeah, the prevention would just be, to be aware of it and not get it on your skin. And if you do, wash it off with soap and, apply sunscreen or wear a long sleeve shirt.
Mhm.
For harvesting, just using scissors or gloves, easy way to prevent it. Harvesting in shaded areas if you're going to pick a lot of it. Um, you can actually eat it raw. As long as you're being careful not to get the juice, on your face or your lips. But yeah, I think it's a little bit overblown. Like I've harvested quite a bit of cow parsnip and never had an issue with it.
Mhm.
So
Oh, that's
What
good to know.
what parts of the plant are you harvesting?
the m- the most common part that I harvest are the young leaves. But I also really like the unopened flower buds and the seeds, both green and brown, once they've started to dry out on the
Mhm.
plant. Um,
Interesting.
yeah,
I
the
read a lot
leaves.
about the petioles and the leaf stems and the actual
Yeah,
flower stem for food.
yeah. You can harvest those too if they're tender. I really like the young leaves. I think they're not as strongly flavored as the petioles and flower stems, because cow parsnip is like very strongly carroty parsley. Like it's got its own unique flavor, but it's like parsley like cranked up to 11. It's like very, very strong. So the young leaves are a little more mellow and they're really very nice to cook or steam. So I tend to just chop them up and add them into other dishes.
Mm.
Like I'll do a stir fry with rice and other wild greens. And it's like a very nice flavor to add to those dishes.
It might be
The
cool
leaf
if you use them
stems, yeah.
for, like those kraut wraps. I was just in Serbia and they like
Yeah,
wrapped, like they did stuffed like cabbage leaves. Might be
totally.
cool to use the
Mm.
parsley for that. That'd be
Yeah,
tasty.
it would be the leaves I'm targeting are like the small, still like curled up
Mm.
ones that are like the most mild. But the big ones, if you were gonna, maybe blanch them first or cook it for a while. I know sometimes those dishes are like baked or boil or simmered for a while. That might mellow out the flavors.
Mm.
Um, or maybe treat them like a dolma and like ferment the older leaves first or something. There's a lot of experimenting that can happen there. Um,
You were gonna mention
yeah.
the flower, the petioles. I think you were gonna say something about
Yeah,
that.
I was like, my mind went off on a tangent about different leaves that could be turned into. I was thinking about like dock leaves turned into like cabbage wraps, and
Yeah,
just like
I gotta do
off
that
on a
more.
forager's journey in my mind.
The best ones.
Yeah, the the unopened flower buds are super interesting. I first learned about these from Alan Burgo. He has an article that I found actually talking about the unopened flower buds of giant angelica or other angelica species, being used as almost more of like a dessert or like a sweet
Mm.
preparation where you
Hmm.
bread it and fry it, and then serve
Now
it
you
with
have
like
Lindy's attention.
Whoa.
honey and powdered sugar. I think it's an Italian dish, but I've made that before. It's amazing. But you can do the same thing with cow parsnip, and they're more of that like savory celery parsley.
Mm.
For whatever reason, there's some sort of flavor profile change between angelica and cow parsnip that it's like one is seems like it'd be better in sweet applications and one would be more savory. But yeah, they're so kind of unique. They're big. They can be like several inches long. You just like chop the whole stem and you get this like almost like cocoon looking pod.
Mm.
And then if you cut it open and it's like it kind of looks like broccoli actually. There's this like just cluster of unopened flower buds in there. And
I think you had a picture of that. Didn't I show that earlier?
I did have a picture. Yeah, in my article, there's a picture of one that is actually a pretty rough looking cow parsnip because it just went through a hailstorm. But the flower bud was preserved.
Let me
Uh,
pull that up. Oh, is this right?
yeah, exactly. So that one is actually emerging a little bit. If you get it before that cracks open, it's just like an enclosed little like bud.
It almost looks like a
cluster.
little butterfly cocoon.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
does.
yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
And is that leaf
So
behind it? I think it's behind it, right? That petiole is behind it. It's not
it's
coming
like
out of it.
yeah, it's like kind of coming out of the end of it.
Oh,
There's
okay.
like
Huh.
so that sheath underneath is it where the leaf is, but the flower bud is like wrapped in that sheath. So
Yeah,
as
this
that
part.
flower
Okay.
would bloom, it would separate from that leaf.
That's something to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Here
Yeah.
you can kind of see the sheath, I think.
Exactly. Yep. And there's the flowers. One of the another identifier, since we're looking at this picture for the video viewers, the flowers are a compound umbel, which is very common in the entire carrot family. These ones
Yeah.
have asymmetrical flower sizes. So if you notice, the flowers kind of on the perimeter of these little flower clusters are larger towards the outside, the petals, versus the smaller ones on the inside. So
Yeah.
they have that like very asymmetrical sizing, which is an identifier of cow parsnip.
Mm.
Cool. Man, yeah, definitely one we need to add to the list, especially because it is so prolific and seems to have so many food uses.
Yeah. So then the final food use that I really like is the seeds, the green and the brown seeds dried as a spice. Um, a species that's found in parts of Europe and Asia, Heracleum persicum, is one of the ingredients in, um, I think it's in za'atar, but the spice is called golpar. And this is another thing I learned from Alan Burgo, because he's always doing research into like different regions in Europe and Asia, and like the things, the wild foods they use that have like an equivalent in North America.
The traditional food uses, yeah. Forager
Yeah.
chef, for anyone who's never
Forager
encountered
chef Alan
Alan's
Burgo.
stuff.
Yeah, if you haven't, you should go read all of his articles.
Definitely. I have an episode.
It might take you a
with
while,
him.
but they're great.
Every single one.
We have an episode with him from like 3-4 years ago on the
Yeah.
podcast. He's fun to talk to.
Yeah, he's a wealth of knowledge. But I love those kind of deep dive research projects he does into different cultures and ethnicities that use these sort of wild foods traditionally, and then how they are equivalent to species in North America. So this is one of them. Persian hogweed, Heracleum persicum, and the spice is it's also called golpar, and the spice is called golpar. So you can, if you just search up golpar, Golpar, you can find the spice, like you can buy it online. Or you can go forage cow parsnip seeds and make it yourself.
There you go.
Yeah.
I think
So-
that's it.
Yeah, and that one actually says ground angelica, but I assume those names are probably interchangeable.
Right.
But yeah, golpar is I'm seeing angelica golpar, so maybe they also make a golpar with an angelica species there. But the traditional one is Heracleum persicum, which is the same genus as cow parsnip. So yeah, that's what I use the seeds for. I think it's definitely worth harvesting them both green and brown. So kind of late summer or midsummer, depending on your elevation, the seeds will be set or growing, but they haven't dried out at all. And I'll just harvest the whole seed head off of the plant. Look for ones that don't have aphids, because sometimes they can have a lot of aphids on them. And then I'll just let it dry a little bit, and I'll strip off all the seeds and then dry them fully. And then you can wait for the seed heads to turn brown on the plant, and then just strip those off. And they have different flavors. The green ones are a little more fresh, not quite as intense, and the brown ones are like very intense and strongly flavored.
That's great.
They're
I didn't
great
even
on
think about
chicken.
the seeds.
Yeah, they're great on meats. They're just like a very unique, like carrot flavor. And we use a lot of carrot seeds as spices in our everyday cooking.
Really?
Yeah,
Like-
cumin, fennel,
Right.
dill, caraway,
Yeah.
coriander. So lots of carrot seeds that we use as spices. So this could be another one. And
That's a
the
great
wild
idea.
versions of those can also be used. We have anise seed is another one. We have anise roots, osmoraza. We have a few species here in Colorado. I'm sure you have it in Montana too. And those seeds are like very strongly anise flavored. And so using those as a wild version of anise seed.
No, there's just sweet Sicily, which kind of has that flavor a bit.
Yeah, same. Yeah, anise root, sweet Sicily. Yep, osmoraza. Same, different common names, same species.
Oh, it's the same one. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the licorice type flavor.
Yeah,
my favorite.
licorice.
I really like that.
Yeah, they're really
Yeah.
good.
Anything licorice is up my boat.
Nice. Yeah. That's a
are
great
there-
one.
Are there any parts of the plant that can be kind of inedible or maybe a little bit too fibrous?
For sure. Yeah. The leaves and flower stalks will become tougher and more fibrous when the plant is focused on flower and seed production. Like most plants, they're going to actively put energy into whatever they're trying to grow. So if it's early in the season, they're growing leaves, and the leaves will be the best part to forage. If they're starting to send up flower stalks, then the flower stalks and flower buds will be the most tender and best part. If they're focused on flowers and seeds, then those will be the best part to forage generally.
And when do you start looking for the leaves, young leaves? Like, is it really early in spring or?
The nice thing about it here is I can, if I miss a season, I can just go up a little bit in
Right.
elevation. So I could start probably as soon as maybe later in March, early April. I seem to recall seeing some getting started while I was turkey hunting one year in April. So probably like late March, early April.
Do you not get a fake spring in Colorado? So
We
we're
do,
like,
for sure. We're having it right now.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Because I'm like, oh man, it's already March, middle of March right now. Things are
Mhm.
about to happen. But then I'm like, there's gonna be more
Yeah,
snow.
it's 70 degrees today, and it's
Oh
supposed to be
wow.
back in like the yeah 30s, 20s next week, I think.
We definitely haven't had 70s yet.
No.
It's more like
Mm-mm.
40.
Yeah, we've had a very warm week this week. It's been nice, but um, I know it's not
Not
quite here
forever.
yet. Yeah, I mean, I get snowed on regularly in late April looking for mushrooms and plants.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my best Colorado morel experiences. I got snowed, like heavily snowed on.
Oh, that's gotta be cool. I've had some like light snows and rain showers for sure, but
Yeah.
never the snow. I
Yeah, I
mean, I
was like
think.
moving snow off of morels to pick them.
Oh my god, I hope you took some pictures of that. That's gotta be a cool
Yeah, I
pic.
have some pictures of it. It was a
Gotta
number of years
frame
ago.
those. The I think some of our foraging brethren in the southern states are already finding morels now.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's about right. Yep, from like the southeastern states.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
we're
gonna
almost
start
there.
sooner
Usually
than we
late
think.
April for us.
Nice.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it's
love
it's
mushrooms.
it's getting there.
Cow parsnips is gonna be definitely one of those I wanna get after this year.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Definitely.
Like I mentioned, like try if you can find some of those young, like barely uncurling leaves, usually at the base of the plant in the spring. Carefully snip one off the base and just try it raw. Like maybe cut a little piece off, or if it's a small one, just eat the whole thing. And get kind of an idea of the flavor. It's strong and unique, but it sort of makes you think about how you would use it, culinarily instead of just like this is something I'm just gonna like eat in loads, as I find it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
Which you can
so
do with some species.
the that is though the often the scariest time, for lack of a better term, to go forage for a new plant is when it is that small and young, right? Because it's hard
Mhm.
to tell it apart from its lookalikes often when the leaves are still like not fully developed. So
Yeah.
so you think that smell is a big giveaway though for them, huh?
The smell for sure. Usually there's gonna be some like larger leaves up already, so you can find like some younger leaves and some larger
Right.
leaves.
So look for
Or
those bigger ones and then the smaller
um,
ones that are still growing.
yeah, in
Yeah.
your case, you could find one that you are pretty sure is cow parsnip, but maybe wait for it to get some other features to identify it fully and then go up in elevation and find the young ones. Um,
Right.
yeah, hit up the low elevation ones and then go up into, high elevation and get the young ones again.
And we never even I don't think we really touched on the kind of habitat they grow in, did we? Like what do they like?
No, I don't think we did. Here in Colorado, they tend to grow in wetter habitats, so low elevation along the rivers, mountain elevations, mountain creeks, wet meadows, marshes, kind of transition periods or transition habitats between wet and, the floodplain of a riparian, if you would. And then
Yeah.
in alpine, it's often along creeks or drainages, rock
Yeah,
slides and those sorts of things that hold
that's what I was
moisture.
reading. Lots of moisture and like partial sunlight, I think I was
Hmm.
reading. It's kind of where they really like to thrive.
Mm.
Yeah. In alpine, you'll see big patches of them just out in the open, though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like I said, archery hunting and stuff, I've definitely seen it where I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure it's parsnip. But yeah, this year I'm gonna really pay attention to it. Put a
Yeah.
bunch of
So
onyx pins down.
those big palmate leaves with, three leaflets usually and super hairy stems. those two traits, you can usually. It's just like once you get familiar with those, it's impossible to mistake, really.
And I already have some streams in mind in the mountains where I think we're gonna find him right away or really easily.
Yeah, I bet you will. We have a species of Geum or Geum an avens. It's Geum that grows in our mountains that sometimes looks like young cow parsnip. That's the one that probably you'd want to look out for in the western states if you're
How do you
sort
spell
of
it?
learning. Geum.
Okay. Avens.
Yeah, once they flower, it's totally different. But there's a wild one that grows in Colorado that I sometimes see
Mostly what I'm
growing
finding is like the
next to
orange.
cow parsnip, and they can look a little similar. The leaves can when they're young.
Okay. We'll pay attention to that.
Yeah, the
I'm
one
not really
here in Colorado is yellow avens.
definitely looks like once it flowers, it's very different.
And the leaves are a lot smaller, but they have that like same sort of like palmate with a couple lobes. They usually have much smaller leaves and they're not quite as hairy, but they are also hairy. So that's one that it's not dangerous. It might be really bitter or mildly toxic if you ate a bunch of it, but you would be able to tell that it's not a carrot just if you mistakenly grabbed the leaf of it.
All right.
Have you tried using cow parsnip in any type of a baking scenario?
Ooh.
Only when I've like roasted, with the ground seeds, chicken or vegetables that I added in as a seasoning. I haven't used the grains at all. But that brings to mind, angelica is a very common cake ingredient. There's like a
Right.
traditional cake in Europe. I think, is it French? I think it might be French. Where they use candied angelica stems in this cake. And so cow parsnip could probably be used in that same way. It might be more on like the savory side, where you might do like, like a savory bread or like a savory scone or something with it. And that might add some good flavors.
That'd be
Yeah.
great. Yeah, the
Yeah.
seeds, roast them up, and then chop them up, throw them. Yeah, I mean, I love
In a scone.
where I'm
Yeah.
from in Germany. We do like this almost like sourdough, like long roll, like elongated roll that has a bunch of caraway on it.
Ooh.
Bet that'd be tasty with like using cow parsnip, and then we also do like Christmas cookies that have caraway and anise, and so I feel like you could probably throw in some cow parsnip. It would probably be pretty tasty.
Yeah. I that reminds me of a Christmas cookie that I grew up eating in New Mexico, called a biscochito.
Mm.
And it's a sugar cookie, but it has this like aniseed spice sugar mixture that goes on it.
That sounds so good.
I was just reminded of that. They're amazing.
Yeah, Poldy's mom makes a cookie that's kind of similar.
Yeah,
Those
the
are
German one.
yeah.
There's probably some sort of connection there, but
I
They're the
bet.
best.
I mean, the polka came over to Mexico, right? I feel like maybe some other things came over from
what are
Germany.
the German cookies called?
I don't know off the top of my head. Hang
Yeah.
on. Let me see if I can find it.
They're
I could
so
probably-
good. I think those ones might be my favorite.
Let's look this up quick. I should know this. But I like
Kind of German are you?
well, I'm not big into baked goods and carbs that much anymore, so
True.
I haven't been paying that much attention.
That's fair.
But, yeah. But I totally so there's one Vanillekipferl, but those are different. Yeah, they're like I'm seeing caraway ginger shortbread cookie, but not the German name.
Yeah.
I'll ask my mom. I'll
Okay.
have her comment on this
Yeah.
There you go.
on this later. I'll pin that
That's
so
great.
we know what that is. Yeah.
I was going to compare the two. The one in New Mexico usually has some sort of liqueur mixed into the the cookie batter too, and
Yeah.
some citrus, usually like orange or.
Yeah. This
It's
one
a
doesn't really.
unique one.
It's more of a vanilla one, and it has like I don't know what she puts on top, but there's like almost this white glaze on it.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know what
I think I've
it's
had those
actually
before.
made of.
That sounds
Yeah.
familiar.
They're good. They're good. And then we
Super
do like
tasty.
traditionally, my grandmom still has all these like hand carved cookie stamps. So you can like, wooden stamps, you can
yeah.
put like really cool motifs, like little pictures into the cookies, and it's sweet.
It's
I like
so
doing
fun.
that. Fun,
That's
fun
awesome.
activity.
Yeah, there's so many fun ways to sort of like use wild foods and recipes that we grew up with or that are like, you know, just
Mhm.
originated in various places that can then be incorporated into our wild food experiments and
Totally.
stuff.
Well, and
I
I
love
think
that.
I read that especially the cow parsnip was a really big ingredient in the Western indigenous cuisine. Like it was widely used
Yeah, that would make sense. There's a lot of it. So,
by a lot of tribes. I think here I actually have the book from I think Sam Thayer's chapter here, because he says that Turner in 1978 says that this plant was utilized as a green vegetable by virtually every Indian group in British Columbia. And then he goes on to say that despite its strong odor, the peeled stems are sweet and succulent. Mormon 1998 lists 38 Native American tribes that were reported to use the plant for food.
Mm.
So, yeah.
yeah,
Seems like it's pretty wildly used
yeah,
Mhm.
still today.
definitely.
It's
Absolutely.
awesome.
It's a great one to know, like I said, especially in the West, because it's year round essentially and it has so many uses.
Mhm.
Yeah. I have this like book stand here. Let me just show it quick. You need to get one if you don't already have one. Lindy got me this for Christmas. It's just like
Oh,
a
yeah.
game changer for taking notes. And I just had this. I was reading last night. I just had this open here. I'm like, oh,
That's awesome. Yeah, I have no shortage of books, obviously. There's
yeah.
actually you can't see, but, like, right down there, there's a stack of, like, probably 30 books that I just have run out of room. There's books on top of the shelves, like,
Can never have enough.
we're
I think it's
building
a forager thing.
yeah, we're building new bookshelves in our living room that are gonna
Yeah.
be able to house all of these and many more, so,
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
yeah.
So
That's sweet.
one more thing real quick. Did we really touch on the roots much? I mean, Lindy just kind of mentioned the roots, but is there a use for them that you found?
I don't know, I've never used the roots,
Okay.
but, there probably is.
Yeah, like, I'm just thinking because that's what I mostly ate from the yellow parsnip. And that's like
Mhm.
the yellow parsnip's basically the feral cultivated parsnip. And you buy the parsnip root at the
Yeah,
store.
parsnips are, like a root vegetable essentially. Like that's
Right.
what most people grow them for, although the greens are also edible.
Yeah. So
I think cow
something to
parsnip was
look into.
named for the leaf. I don't know why, actually.
Yeah. I'm going to look into that more.
Yeah, I was gonna see
'Cause,
if I could find something about
yeah,
it.
or we can check it now. But because the roots, I do see a picture in Sam's book here with the roots. Oh, he says here
Yeah.
cow parsnip roots are way too hot and bitter for most palates.
Mm.
Okay. So
Interesting.
maybe there are some applications for dried into a spice or as a
Like
as a
a
flavor additive.
pseudo
Yeah.
horseradish type deal.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
if you're one of
connected to the
those
mustard, but they'll be like
capstation lovers, maybe.
parsley, like spicy hot parsley, carrot, like chemically hot.
Could be kind of fun, I guess.
Yeah.
Depending.
Like I said, if you like capstation, like my old roommate Eric in college, he was addicted. That's all he made, a big guac with the spiciest peppers every night.
Really.
No.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. I
It's
tried
just
it.
this talk of spicy roots. Just I'm circling back to mustards now. I love Japanese food, and I was thinking of wasabi. Wasabi is in the mustard family as well. So
Hmm.
there's another example.
Oh.
Of,
I didn't know that.
There you
that's
go. Yeah,
what's
I think it's a
highly
type of
prized fruits.
horseradish.
I've always thought of wasabi as being like a pea. It's
Really?
totally,
Because
totally
of the
wrong.
wasabi pea.
Yeah. Yep.
Lindy's like,
Right?
My mind has always been like, that's a pea.
that's
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah, it's in the Eutrema genus.
Mm.
It's not
Interesting.
not a genus I'm familiar with in the mustard family.
Yeah. Lots to
Eutrema
learn.
japonica. Yeah.
Lots to learn. It's never ending. I made a big list of new plants I want to get into this year, mostly plants, and we'll see how much I get to. Do you have usually when you go to learn a new plant, do you have a game plan when you go forage? I mean, I'm sure you kind of like look for the terrain, but do you go out and look for one plant, or do you just kind of go on walks and just kind of see what you run into?
I do a mix of both. I'm at the point where if I'm looking for a plant specifically for some reason, like I want to get some photography about it, or I want to try a recipe with it, or I've never found it before and I want to find it, then I'll like hone in on just that plant and like try to find the habitats it needs. But oftentimes I'm just out doing other foraging and my brain will have picked up the identifiers of that plant from reading it or, seeing it online somewhere or something. And I'll just be like, oh, that's that plant. Let me like pick some and further identify it. And, if I can confirm it, then I'll try some. That
Yeah,
just takes practice to do. Newer foragers, need to be a little more intentional, I think.
right.
Um,
And you're a pretty big fan of just like reading books and like just kind of going through them, reading a little bit here, a little bit there, just to kind of
yeah,
get those patterns into your head, right?
totally. Yeah. Or like looking online or if I like come across a new plant, that I'm interested in online or, in a book or something, I'll like research a little bit further to reinforce those patterns. Yeah, there's different approaches to it for sure. This year, I'm going to be a little bit more intentional about targeting specific species because I'm writing a book and I need to get
Oh, sweet.
photography and stuff for it. So,
Awesome. Or that'll
yeah,
that'll be exciting.
yeah, it's
Mhm.
a couple years out. Should be published 2027, but yeah, it's pretty exciting. Got a publisher who reached out to me and asked me to do a
Heck yeah, man.
Colorado foraging book.
That's
That's
awesome.
awesome.
Yeah,
That's
thank you.
that's yeah, that's sweet. I can't wait to see that.
Me too.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you already have all your articles, right? And like I'm sure you can channel a lot of that into a book. Why not?
Yeah, a lot of it will be I'll be able to pull those previous, working on articles and other stuff and put that into the book. But I've got some species that I haven't written about that I'd really like to include in the book that I need to do some more experimentation with, and then it'll have some small like recipe suggestions. So I need to do more recipe testing and development, and
Great.
so I
Well, we'll
need
look
to be a
forward
little
to
more
that.
intentional this year.
Would love to do a book, maybe I'm sure you're gonna do like a tour, book tour where you go in a bunch of places and talk about it. So we'd love to have you on for that once it drops.
Yeah, that'd be
Definitely.
great. I'll at least do it locally since it's a Colorado specific book.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, a
Hop it
lot of
onto
the,
podcasts and
especially Montana, like there's a lot of crossover.
yeah, it'll
Mhm.
be a lot of crossover for most of the Western, like Rocky Mountain states at the very least.
Great.
Yeah,
Awesome.
so that's exciting and more hunting this year. So
Yeah.
lots
Yeah.
to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to, maybe we can do another one this year. I know getting pretty late now. We talked a lot about the mustard, but, yeah, I'd love to hear more about your hunting, goals.
Yeah,
Yeah. We
yeah,
can
that'd be a
That'd
fun
be a fun
challenge.
one.
I've got a
Did
lot of
you
ideas this
did
year.
you
So.
last year, were you successful? I know last time we talked about some goals.
Um, yeah, I went on an elk hunt, unsuccessful, but a lot of fun. Totally, we just like picked a spot, applied. My buddy scouted it once, and then we just like went out there and tried to figure it out on the fly, like over
And
three
you
days,
get a
4 days.
pretty short season, right,
Yeah, and
in Colorado?
we had an even shorter season just because of our schedules at the time. So we essentially did a weekend hunt.
Yeah.
Had one chance that just like first thing in the morning, and we just were not prepared. Like rifles were still locked in the truck.
Oh, no.
We were like
Typical.
sneaking to the truck, trying to get the rifles out. They were in the meadow. The elk were in the meadow we were camping in. So it was like,
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
that
yeah,
sounds about right.
classic.
yeah. And then by the time we were like rifles out, a four-wheeler drove by on the road and
Oh,
it
no.
wandered off into the woods.
Yep.
Dang.
Yeah, otherwise it was just, yeah, learning a new area and running into we ran into some cows and spikes, which were not legal for the tag, and Had a
Bummer.
good time. And then I helped a buddy do his first mule deer hunt successfully in
Sweet.
Colorado, which was really fun. I always love taking people on their first hunts.
Yeah, that's always one of the best
Mhm.
experiences.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then I am lucky to have a friend who has some family with a lot of property out in Nebraska. So I got to do a whitetail hunt out there and got my first whitetail buck this year.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Lindy got her first whitetail buck too last year, so
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Super
It was
exciting.
really fun. Those still, like, for whatever reason, I've got like maybe a big mule deer would do it too, but there are some giant whitetail on their property, and they just, every time I run into one, I'm like too messed up to like settle in for a shot. So I've like clean missed a couple big whitetails on their place.
Oh, it happens.
I'm like usually like a one shot is all I need. All of my other hunts previously. So the whitetail for whatever reason get me extra excited.
Well, they're like super how should I put this? They're like super wary.
Yeah,
Like a
very
mule
cagey.
deer. Mule deer will just like it sees you,
Hang out, walk up to
runs
you.
20 yards, look back at you.
They'll
keep
eat
running.
a snack.
Elk, yeah, elk's pretty wary too, but
The whitetail or the
whitetails
mule deer
are
are
like,
very forgiving. Yeah.
yeah, whitetails like, and they'll pin you out in a tree easily. Yeah,
Yeah.
Mhm.
We
They're
were the
very-
one that I ended up getting, I spotted from like probably half a mile away. And we just like we saw kind of where they were headed, and we just went and laid on a hilltop, and they walked right to us, and we got to just like settle in and pick the one I wanted. And
awesome.
it was,
Well,
it's
so you got some meat.
really cool
That's
hunts.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I still have some from the previous year that we don't eat it every day, so we it generally takes us a while to go through. And last year I killed a mule deer and a white-tailed doe out there. So
Whitetail doe, best meat in my opinion.
yeah,
If I
it's really
could-
good.
Other than
If I
antelope.
could shoot 5 of those, I'd do that every.
I really like pronghorn antelope meat.
Yeah.
I think that's probably my
Antelope's
favorite so
best.
far.
Yeah, we that's an interesting one. The antelope. We had Randy Newberg on the podcast, and
oh, cool.
he made a good point about the reason people probably have such a bad, antelope has such a bad rep, at least here. It's just because of how they treat it after the kill, after the shot.
Yep.
A lot of people just throw it into the truck. It's still usually like September. When is it? Like, I think it's October's rifle,
October,
but
yeah.
August is like bow season, right?
Yeah,
Usually
late
here.
August, September.
So it could be a little warm and people don't gut them right away. So it's,
And they
and
get
I think
hair
that's
and
true
dirt
for,
and-
it's true for a lot of wild game. Like you need to
Yeah.
Get them
take
pulled
care-
down as
yeah.
quickly as possible.
Yeah.
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 Cool.
My
man.
experience with pronghorn has been they were all delicious, and I did that like one of them I had to hike out with 3 miles and just immediately got it on ice, and it was still great.
Yep.
I think it's the throwing it in the truck and driving around for a couple hours,
Yeah.
problematic. But
Yeah.
I've got a turkey hunt this year that I drew in eastern Colorado that I haven't. It's a every 3-year hunt. It takes some points to draw because it's on a kind of a smaller unit. Pretty excited for that. And then I'm hoping to draw a mule deer hunt, an early rifle mule deer hunt, which is something that I've never done. It's early, with like the first week of October. So like not high country archery, but not low rut season. It'll be like high elevation timber, something a little different.
Those are hard from what I
Yeah.
hear.
Mhm.
Yeah. Every once in a while,
try.
I run into those timber muleys. But they're all usually kind of, at that point, they're kind of like whitetail.
Yeah.
Like they're very wary and aware.
Yeah. It's any unit that has a lot of good habitat. So I'm excited for the challenge, and if I draw it, to spend some time backpacking and looking for deer.
Sweet. Well, I wish you all the success there. And like I said, maybe we'll do another episode before or after the hunting season. That'd be awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for sitting down with us and chatting to mustards and cow parsnip. That was super informative and very fun.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
where can people learn more about you and follow you?
Main would be my website, foragecolorado.com. I'm also on most of the social medias, although I've been less active recently. Either Forage Colorado or my name Orion, Aon, Orion. Last name is Aon. Hoping to do some more longer videos on YouTube this year, so maybe look out for those. And yeah, otherwise, always my website is the best place if you want to get in touch. Send me an email.
Heck yeah, and I'll have everything in the description so people can find it easily. And yeah, highly recommend all of Orion's stuff. And your last name is like the coolest last name ever. I don't know,
Thank
your
you.
parents gave you like in general, it sounds like it's like you're from the universe, you know?
It's a
Orion,
unique.
man.
Your name is unique, at least at least in the U.S. I don't know if
That's
it's
Yeah.
true.
common in
That's
Germany.
true. No, not very common. So my full real name is actually Max Leopold is my first name.
Okay.
And it's like my dad is a medieval nerd, so he gave me this medieval name. Never called me it. Never. I've never heard him call me Max Leopold. He immediately went to Polly, which is like the nickname for that name. And
Okay.
I think he just wanted to call me Poldy, but didn't like want to give me the actual name. I don't know.
Sure.
But
Sure.
yeah, it is unique too. It
Oh,
is
that's
also
unique.
though, it's like I always got to spell it for people, you know?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For
All
sure.
right. Cool. Well, thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thank
We'll do
you.
another one soon.
Sweet.